I used to think silence meant peace. That if a house was quiet, it meant nothing was wrong. But silence can also mean two people are slowly drifting so far apart that neither knows how to reach the other anymore. My name is Kayla Morgan, and for years, my life followed a strict rhythm. Wake up before sunrise. Shower. Coffee. Work. Home by 6. Dinner by 7. Sleep by 10. It was safe. Predictable. Built for a man who believed loyalty mattered more than excitement. My wife, Alyssa Morgan, used to love that about me. At least, she said she did. We met in our late 20s, both hungry for stability after messy pasts. She was ambitious, sharp, always dressed like she had somewhere important to be. I admired that drive. I supported it. When she landed a corporate position in a fast-moving consulting firm, I became her biggest cheerleader. Late nights, sudden meetings, weekend calls. I never complained. That was my mistake. Somewhere along the way, ambition turned into distance. Conversations became shorter. Laughter became rare. Touch became accidental, like we'd forgotten how to reach for each other on purpose. She still wore her ring, still kissed my cheek before leaving, but it felt practiced, like muscle memory instead of emotion. I noticed the changes before I noticed the lies. Her phone was always face down. Passwords changed. Notifications silenced. She started dressing differently, sharper, bolder, like she was stepping into a version of herself I wasn't invited to meet. When I asked how her day was, she'd answer with one word. When I shared mine, she'd nod without really hearing. I told myself it was stress. Promotions did that to people. Pressure reshaped them. But pressure doesn't erase intimacy. Choice does. The first real crack appeared on a Thursday night. She came home late, heels in her hand, lipstick slightly smudged. She smelled like unfamiliar cologne layered beneath her perfume. I noticed it immediately. I always did. You okay? I asked. She smiled too fast. Long day. That smile didn't reach her eyes. That night, lying beside her, I stared at the ceiling while she fell asleep almost instantly, phone tucked under her pillow. I realized something unsettling. She was resting easier than I was, like someone who had already made a decision and no longer felt conflicted about it. The next morning, she announced she'd be traveling for a work weekend, a networking retreat, clients, colleagues, important people. She said it casually, like she was asking me to pick up milk. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I didn't beg for reassurance. I simply listened. And as she spoke, I watched her carefully, how she avoided eye contact, how her fingers twisted her ring, how her voice stayed calm, but her breathing didn't. She wanted this trip. Not professionally, personally. What she didn't know was that silence doesn't mean blindness. It means observation. And while she packed for a weekend she believed would stay hidden, a chain of events had already begun. One that would expose not just her betrayal, but the truth about everyone involved, including the man she thought she was choosing over me. The house felt different the moment Alyssa left. Not empty, alert, like it was waiting for something to happen. I didn't follow her. I didn't check her location. I didn't call her hotel. I went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, laughed at the right moments. From the outside, nothing about my life looked broken. But inside, every detail replayed itself on a loop. The way she'd rushed through breakfast, the way she hadn't kissed me goodbye, the way she'd said my name like it was a formality. By Friday evening, the messages slowed. One text before dinner, one before bed. Short, efficient, no warmth, no inside jokes, no heart emojis she used to send without thinking. I stared at my phone longer than I should have, then set it down. That was when the notification appeared, not from her, but from an unfamiliar email address. The subject line read, "I think we need to talk." I almost deleted it. Almost. The sender's name was Marissa Hale. I recognized the last name instantly. Her husband, Derek Hale, was Alyssa's direct manager. My chest tightened, not in panic, but in something colder. Focused. I opened the email. Marissa didn't waste time with pleasantries. She wrote like a woman who had already cried enough and was done pretending. She said she hadn't known how to reach me at first. She said she'd spent 2 nights debating whether to stay silent. Then she wrote the line that made my hands go still on the keyboard. I believe our spouses are lying to us, and I can prove it. She attached nothing. No photos. No documents. Just an address and a time for the following afternoon. I closed my laptop and sat back, staring at the wall. My mind tried to protect me, offering excuses, alternative explanations, coincidences. But my gut had already decided. It had known before the email arrived. Saturday came slower than I expected. I went to the gym early, pushing myself harder than usual. I needed the exhaustion. The burn reminded me I was still in control of something. Afterward, I showered, dressed carefully, and left the house with a calm that felt almost artificial. The cafe Marissa chose was quiet, neutral, the kind of place people used when they didn't want to be overheard but didn't want to feel alone either. She was already there when I arrived. Marissa Hale looked nothing like I'd imagined. No dramatic makeup, no trembling hands. She was composed, eyes sharp, posture straight. A woman who had rebuilt herself in silence. She didn't stand when she saw me, just nodded toward the chair across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was steady, but tired. "Saturday, you said you had proof." She studied my face for a moment, like she was gauging how much truth I could handle. Then she slid her phone across the table. "Before I show you anything," she said quietly, "I need you to understand something. I didn't find this by accident. I found it because my husband changed." That word again. Changed. She told me about Derek's late nights, the sudden interest in appearance, the secrecy, the way he'd stopped sharing even the smallest parts of his day. She said it felt like living with a stranger who wore her husband's face. "I didn't want to spy," she said. "I wanted to believe him. But belief doesn't erase patterns." She tapped her screen. What I saw wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. Hotel bookings that overlapped with Alyssa's so-called work events. Expense reports for dinners marked as client meetings, yet charged for two. Text message timestamps. Flight confirmations for the same cities, the same weekends. And then there was one image. Alyssa, unmistakable, laughing in the reflection of a restaurant window. Derek's hand resting casually at the small of her back. Familiar, comfortable, intimate in a way that wasn't accidental. I didn't react the way I expected to. I didn't yell. I didn't feel dizzy. I didn't even feel angry. Not yet. I felt clear. Marissa watched me carefully. "I'm sorry," she said. "I wish I was wrong." I handed her phone back. "How long?" She exhaled slowly. "Months. Maybe longer." That was when something inside me shifted. Not toward revenge, but resolve. "What are you planning to do?" I asked. Her lips pressed together. "I'm done being quiet. But I don't want chaos. I want truth. Consequences. Clean ones." I nodded. "So do I." We sat there for a moment, two people betrayed by the same lie, bound not by anger, but by clarity. As I stood to leave, Marissa added, "They think they're careful." I paused. "They're not," she said. "They're just arrogant." That night, Alyssa called from her hotel. Her voice was light, relaxed. She talked about meetings and networking and exhaustion. I listened. I even laughed at the right places. When she hung up, she said, "I miss you." I replied evenly, "I know." And for the first time since this began, I meant something very different. Because the truth was no longer hidden, and neither was my patience. By the time Alyssa returned, I had already rehearsed the moment in my head 100 different ways. None of them involved shouting. None involved pleading. What surprised me most was how calm I felt. Not numb, focused. Like someone who had finally been handed the full map after wandering in circles for months. The key to revenge, I learned quickly, wasn't anger. It was patience. The week after her networking weekend, I played my role perfectly. I asked about her trip. I listened while she described conversations that never happened and people she never met. She talked about opportunity, about visibility, about being noticed. She said all the things that sounded ambitious on the surface but hollow underneath. At night, she turned away from me in bed, claiming she was exhausted. I didn't push. Desire can't survive lies, and she knew it. Still, I watched her. How she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, how her mood lifted after certain messages, how she smiled at the screen like it was feeding her something she thought she deserved. Meanwhile, Marissa and I stayed in quiet contact. We didn't text often. When we did, it was deliberate, factual, strategic. She shared schedules, expense records, internal emails Derek never bothered to delete. He thought corporate systems protected him. He forgot those systems left trails. I discovered things that made my stomach turn, not because they were shocking, but because they were so ordinary. Alyssa hadn't been reckless. She'd been calculated. The affair fit neatly into her routine, tucked between meetings and deadlines. She didn't want a new life. She wanted an escape that didn't require sacrifice. Derek was the same. He didn't promise her the world. He promised convenience, compliments, an ego boost dressed up as connection. Two people using each other to avoid facing the emptiness they'd helped create at home. One evening, Alyssa mentioned an upcoming company mixer. Managers, spouses, partners, she said casually. It's optional, but it might look good if we went. I almost laughed. Marissa had already forwarded me the invite days earlier. That night, after Alyssa fell asleep, I stood in the dark living room and realized something important. I didn't want to expose her in anger. I wanted her to understand the cost of being careless with someone else's trust. So I began preparing, not for confrontation, but for clarity. I gathered our shared financial records, mortgage statements, investment accounts, documents Alyssa never looked at because she assumed stability meant permanence. I met with a lawyer quietly, professionally, without drama. Knowledge replaced fear. Options replaced confusion. At the same time, Marissa made her move. She stopped confronting Derek altogether. She became agreeable, calm, detached in a way that unsettled him. He mistook her silence for surrender. He started spending more time out, leaving his phone unattended, sharing more than he should in careless conversations. Alyssa noticed his confidence growing and mirrored it. She began pushing boundaries, staying out later, dressing sharper, acting less apologetic. Cheaters don't hide forever. They test how much they can get away with. And we let them. The night of the mixer arrived sooner than expected. Alyssa dressed with intention, asking my opinion for the first time in months. Do I look okay? She asked, smoothing her dress. You look impressive, I said honestly. She smiled, satisfied, never realizing she was dressing for an ending. The venue was elegant, polished, full of people pretending success was the same as fulfillment. Derek greeted us like a host, all charm and confidence. Marissa stood beside him, poised, unreadable. I watched Alyssa's reaction when she saw her. Just a flicker, just enough. Throughout the evening, Derek and Alyssa kept their distance. Too much distance, actually. Overcorrection. They thought subtlety made them safe. They forgot who was watching. When the speeches began, Marissa leaned toward me and whispered, "Now." I stepped away quietly, making a phone call I'd already scheduled. Moments later, the room shifted. A senior partner took the microphone unexpectedly. He announced a brief compliance update. Routine language. Polite smiles. Then the tone changed. Due to recent findings, he said, certain internal matters are being reviewed. Derek's smile tightened. He looked at Alyssa. She looked at him. Phones around the room buzzed as emails landed simultaneously. Company-wide. Audit notices. Meeting requests. Subject lines that made careers tremble. I didn't look at Alyssa. I didn't need to. Marissa stood, collected her purse, and turned to Derek. We'll talk at home, she said calmly. Or with lawyers. Your choice. She walked away without looking back. Only then did Alyssa reach for my arm. Caleb, she whispered. What's going on? I met her eyes for the first time that night. The truth, I said quietly, and it's been going on longer than you think. Her face drained of color. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of her understanding. The drive home was silent in a way that felt heavier than shouting ever could. Alyssa stared out the window, arms folded tight, like she could hold herself together if she didn't move. I kept my eyes on the road, steady, deliberate, aware of every breath I took. This wasn't anger anymore. It was clarity. Halfway home, she finally spoke. You planned this, she said, not accusing, realizing. I didn't answer right away. Some truths deserve space before they land. I protected myself, I said calmly. That's not the same thing. She laughed once, sharp and hollow. So that's it. You humiliate me in front of everyone and call it protection. I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Only then did I look at her. You humiliated us, I said. I just stopped pretending not to see it. Inside the house, everything looked the same. The couch where we'd watch movies. The kitchen table where we'd planned a future. Familiar places don't soften betrayal. They sharpen it. Alyssa dropped her purse on the counter, hands shaking now. You don't understand, she said. I didn't mean for it to go this far. That sentence told me everything. You didn't mean to get caught, I replied evenly. There's a difference. She sank into a chair, covering her face. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But pity can undo choices. I laid out the facts, one by one. The legal steps I'd already taken. The financial separation. The boundaries that were no longer negotiable. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I spoke like someone closing a chapter with intention. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now you live with the consequences, I said. Just like I did while you were lying. She looked up, eyes red. Was any of it real? Between us. I paused. That was the hardest question of the night. Yes, I said. Once. But you traded it for attention that didn't require honesty. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Over the next weeks, the fallout unfolded without drama, just inevitability. Derek resigned before the investigation concluded. Marissa filed for divorce on her terms. Alyssa moved out, taking only what was hers. The silence returned to the house, but this time it didn't feel like loss. It felt like relief. I rebuilt my routine slowly. Mornings still began early, but now I sat with my coffee instead of rushing. I reconnected with friends I neglected. I started running again, not to escape, but to move forward. One afternoon, weeks later, I received a message from Marissa. Thank you, it read, for choosing truth over chaos. I replied simply, you did the hard part. I just stopped lying to myself. The last time Alyssa and I spoke was brief, practical, civil. I never thought you'd be capable of that, she said, standing at the door. Of what? I asked. Walking away without begging, she said, without breaking. I held the door open. I broke quietly, I replied, and then I healed. When she left, I closed the door gently, not in anger, not in sorrow, but in certainty. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming your dignity when someone bets you won't. And the most satisfying ending isn't watching them fall. It's realizing you no longer need to watch it all.